r/TrueOffMyChest. My pastor stepson cut my pay in half, so I chose my fiancé. The organ keys felt cold under my trembling fingers as I stared at the paycheck stub in my other hand. Half. Pastor Marcus had actually cut my salary in half. Mom, what's wrong? Sarah's voice drifted from her wheelchair beside the piano bench, where she'd been patiently waiting for me to finish morning practice. At 26, my daughter still had the innocent concern of a child, one of the lasting effects of the accident that changed both our lives 8 years ago. Nothing, sweetheart, I lied, shoving the stub into my purse. Just tired. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. That paycheck was our lifeline, Sarah's medical bills, her physical therapy, the mortgage on our little house that I'd specifically chosen because it was wheelchair accessible. For 12 years, I poured my heart into this church, played every Sunday service, every wedding, every funeral. I'd been here longer than half the congregation, longer than the previous pastor, and definitely longer than his arrogant son who'd waltzed in 6 months ago acting like he owned the place. Which, technically, I suppose he did now. Mrs. Helen? The voice made me jump. Marcus stood in the sanctuary doorway, all 6'2" of his self-important frame filling the space. At 28, he was younger than some of my bras, yet he spoke to me like I was a wayward teenager. Could I see you in the office? My phone buzzed with a text from David, asterisk still on for dinner tonight? Can't wait to see you, asterisk. I smiled despite myself. David Mitchell was everything Marcus wasn't, kind, humble, genuinely caring. The fact that he pastored a Methodist church 3 towns over was our little secret. Well, that and our 18-month engagement. Conservative Baptist churches like ours didn't exactly celebrate their organists running off with Methodist pastors, even perfectly respectable ones who brought me flowers every Friday and had already started learning sign language to better communicate with Sarah. Mrs. Helen? Marcus's voice carried that edge of impatience I'd grown to hate. Sarah, honey, wait here. Practice your scales if you want. I kissed my daughter's forehead and followed Marcus down the hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced deacons from decades past. They seemed to watch me with disapproval, though that might have been my imagination. Marcus's office reeked of expensive cologne and entitlement. He'd redecorated the moment his father retired, replacing the warm family photos and well-worn theological books with modern furniture and a massive flat-screen TV. Because apparently sermons needed PowerPoint presentations now. I suppose you have questions about your adjusted compensation, he said, not bothering to offer me a seat. Adjusted? I remained standing too, spine straight. 45 years of church politics had taught me when to make myself small and when to take up space. This felt like a taking up space moment. Is that what we're calling it? Budget constraints require difficult decisions. He shuffled papers on his desk without looking at them. We're tightening belts across all non-essential positions. Non-essential. The words tasted bitter. I've been here since before you could drive, Marcus. Pastor Marcus, he corrected. And longevity doesn't exempt anyone from fiscal responsibility. Through his office window, I could see the parking lot where he'd reserved the prime spot closest to the building for his brand new BMW. Funny how fiscal responsibility looked different depending on your perspective. My phone buzzed again. Another text from David, asterisk Sarah's physical therapist called me by mistake, her appointment's confirmed for Thursday. Love you both, asterisk. That's when something shifted inside my chest, like a door I'd kept locked finally creaking open. The warmth that spread through me at David's text was immediately crushed by Marcus's next words. I also need to discuss your outside activities. My blood turned to ice. Excuse me? Mrs. Pemberton mentioned seeing you at Romano's last Friday. With a man. He leaned back in his leather chair, another new addition, and steepled his fingers. You understand how appearances matter in a church this size. Mrs. Pemberton. Of course. The woman collected gossip like some people collected stamps, and she had the subtlety of a foghorn. David and I had driven an hour out of town specifically to avoid this exact scenario, but apparently not far enough. My personal life is my own business, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Not when you represent this church. Marcus opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. I've been reviewing your employment contract. There's a morality clause that requires all staff to maintain standards befitting their position. The air in the room felt thick. Are you suggesting I'm immoral? I'm suggesting that a church organist carrying on with strange men sends the wrong message to our congregation. Especially when she has a disabled daughter who needs stability, not confusion. The mention of Sarah made my hands clench into fists. Don't you dare. I'm trying to help you, Helen. His voice took on a patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. The salary adjustment gives you motivation to focus on what really matters. Your duties here, your daughter's needs. Not gallivanting around with whoever caught your fancy. Through the thin office walls, I could hear Sarah playing scales on the piano, each note pure and sweet. She'd been so excited when David had brought her a beginner sign language book last week, spending hours practicing the alphabet. He was the first person since her father died who'd bothered to meet her where she was instead of talking around her or treating her like she was invisible. How much do you know? I asked quietly. Marcus smiled, and it reminded me of a snake sizing up a mouse. Enough. Romano's wasn't your only outing, was it? The Methodist Church in Millfield has a very active pastor. Young, from what I hear. Recently divorced. Wrong on the divorced part, David had been a widower for 5 years, but I wasn't about to correct him. You've been having me followed? I've been protecting my church's interests. This congregation trusted my father for 30 years because he maintained standards. I won't let his legacy be tarnished by staff who can't control themselves. My phone buzzed a third time. I glanced down reflexively and saw David's contact photo, the two of us laughing at Sarah's birthday party, him wearing the ridiculous paper crown she'd insisted he put on. It was the first birthday since her accident where she truly smiled. Marcus noticed me looking. Turn it off. What? Your phone. We're having a serious conversation about your future here, and I need your full attention. The casual command in his voice, like I was a misbehaving child, sent something hot and fierce shooting through my veins. 12 years of faithful service, and this was how he spoke to me? Like I was property he could manipulate and control? My future here, I repeated slowly. Exactly. The reduced salary is temporary, provided you can prove your commitment to this congregation. And whatever inappropriate relationship you've gotten yourself entangled in, focus on your responsibilities, and we can discuss restoration of your full pay in 6 months. 6 months. Meanwhile, Sarah's medical bills would pile up, the mortgage would strain our already tight budget, and David would wonder why the woman who'd promised to marry him suddenly went silent. And if I don't? Marcus's smile widened. Well, that would be unfortunate. For everyone involved. The thread hung in the air between us like smoke from a snuffed candle. I stared at this boy, because that's what he was, despite his pastoral collar and expensive suit, and felt something dangerous coiling in my chest. Unfortunate how, exactly? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Marcus leaned forward, clearly enjoying himself. Well, Sarah's therapy schedule requires a lot of flexibility. Morning appointments, afternoon sessions. Hard to maintain reliable work hours with those kinds of commitments. And then there's the matter of your emotional stability since your husband's passing. Grief can be so unpredictable. My breath caught. He was threatening to use my daughter's disability and my widowhood against me. Paint me as unstable, unreliable. In a small town like ours, that kind of reputation would follow me everywhere. You wouldn't dare. I'd hate to, Helen. I really would. But this church has standards to maintain. If our organist can't meet her obligations. Mom? Sarah's voice drifted down the hallway, worried now. Mom, where are you? Coming, sweetheart. I called back, never taking my eyes off Marcus. When I looked at him again, I saw my late husband's killer sitting behind that desk. Not literally, Robert had died of a heart attack while coaching Sarah's soccer team. But the same casual cruelty that had taken everything stable from our lives was staring at me now, wrapped in religious authority and false concern. Marcus stood up, smoothing his tie. Think about what I've said. You have until Sunday to make your decision. Full commitment to this church and end whatever midlife crisis you're having, or find somewhere else to work. I'm sure Millfield Methodist needs an organist. His laugh was cold. Though I doubt they pay as well as we do. Even at half salary. I wanted to tell him exactly what he could do with his ultimatum. Instead, I turned and walked out, my hands shaking with suppressed rage. Sarah looked up anxiously as I entered the sanctuary. You look upset. I forced a smile and signed along with my words, something David had encouraged me to do. Just tired, honey. Ready to go home? As we gathered our things, I noticed Mrs. Pemberton lurking near the bulletin board, pretending to read announcements she'd probably memorized. The moment she saw me, her eyes lit up with predatory interest. Helen, dear. How are you managing? Such a difficult time for single mothers. Fine, thank you. I kept walking, but she fell into step beside us. I was just telling my prayer circle how we need to lift you up. A woman your age, raising a special needs child alone, it's so easy to make poor choices when you're lonely. Sarah's face fell. She understood more than people gave her credit for, especially when it came to veiled insults about her condition. My mother makes excellent choices, Sarah said quietly, her words slightly slurred but fierce. She's the strongest person I know. Mrs. Pemberton's smile faltered. Of course, dear. I just meant. Come on, Sarah. I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders. We need to get home. As we walked to my aging Honda, I caught sight of Marcus watching us from his office window. Even from a distance, I could see a satisfied smirk. He thought he had me trapped. My phone buzzed with another text from David, asterisk everything okay? You seem quiet today, asterisk. I stared at the message, then at the church building where I'd invested 12 years of my life, then at my daughter who deserved so much better than this toxic place. Maybe Marcus was right about one thing. It was time to make a choice. Just not the one he expected. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator, a stack of bills, and a growing sense of dread. The numbers didn't lie, no matter how many times I rearranged them. Sarah's physical therapy, $320 a month after insurance. Her speech therapy, another $280. The specialized equipment she needed, grab bars, shower chair, modified utensils, seemed to require constant replacement or adjustment. Then there was the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and the endless parade of medical copays that arrived like clockwork. With my full salary, we managed. Barely, but we managed. Cut that in half, and we'd be underwater within 2 months. My phone rang. David's name lit up the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. How could I explain that my new boss was essentially blackmailing me into cutting contact? Hey, I answered, trying to sound normal. There she is. I was starting to worry when you didn't respond to my texts. His voice was warm, concerned, and it made my chest ache. 3 months we'd been together, and he'd never once made me feel like a burden. Never treated Sarah like an inconvenience. When I'd panicked about leaving her with a sitter for our first real date, he'd suggested we have dinner at my place instead. He'd spent the evening teaching Sarah card tricks and listening to her play piano with the patience of a saint. Just a long day, I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. Want to talk about it? I've got time. Of course he did. David always had time, even with his own demanding schedule. Last week he'd rearranged 3 meetings to attend Sarah's therapy appointment with us, knowing she got nervous around new doctors. It's church politics, I said carefully. Nothing too dramatic. A pause. David was perceptive enough to hear what I wasn't saying. The new pastor giving you trouble? Something like that. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Sarah in the living room, working on homework with the focused determination she brought to everything. Her handwriting was still uneven, but she refused help unless she truly needed it. David, can I ask you something? Anything. If you had to choose between financial security and personal happiness, what would you do? Another pause, longer this time. That's a hell of a question, Helen. Are you okay? No, I wanted to say. I'm being manipulated by a vindictive boy who thinks he can control my life. I'm terrified of losing my income and disappointing my daughter. I'm falling in love with you and it might cost me everything. Just thinking out loud, I said instead. Well, for what it's worth, I think happiness without security is unstable, but security without happiness is just an expensive prison. Before I could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway, signing that she needed help with her math homework. I covered the phone and told her I'd be right there. I should go, I said to David. Helen? Whatever's going on, you don't have to handle it alone. You know that, right? The kindness in his voice nearly broke my resolve. This was exactly why Marcus's ultimatum felt like a knife to the chest. David wasn't just some casual fling, he was the first person since Robert died who made me feel like myself again. Who saw Sarah's potential instead of her limitations. I know, I whispered. After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. 45 years old, and I was still letting other people dictate my choices. Still prioritizing everyone else's comfort over my own dignity. But as I helped Sarah with her homework, watching her struggle through problems that would have been easy before the accident, I knew the math was simple. She needed that income. We both did. Marcus was counting on that desperation. The question was, would I let him win? The next few days crawled by like a slow-motion nightmare. I tried to maintain normalcy, practice hymns, respond to David's texts with careful cheerfulness, help Sarah with her therapy exercises, but Marcus's ultimatum hung over everything like a storm cloud. Wednesday brought the monthly church board meeting, which I normally didn't attend. But Marcus had specifically requested my presence to discuss the music budget. The moment I walked into that conference room, I knew I'd been set up. The usual suspects were there, Mrs. Pemberton, of course, along with Tom Fletcher from the hardware store, elderly Mr. Daniels who'd been on the board since the Mesozoic era, and 3 of Marcus's former college buddies who'd somehow landed positions despite having zero church experience. Helen. Marcus beamed like we were old friends. So glad you could join us. We were just discussing ways to maximize our resources. He'd prepared a presentation. An actual PowerPoint about operational efficiency and fiscal responsibility. Slide after slide of charts and graphs, all designed to make my salary look like an unreasonable luxury. As you can see, Marcus clicked to a pie chart. Personnel costs are eating up 43% of our budget. That's simply unsustainable. Mrs. Pemberton nodded sagely. We have to be good stewards of the congregation's donations. Absolutely, chimed in Jake Morrison, one of Marcus's college cronies who'd been hired as youth outreach coordinator, a position that seemed to involve playing video games in the church basement. We can't let sentiment override sound business practices. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Jake was making more than my reduced salary would be, and his idea of youth outreach was posting Bible verses on TikTok. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat. Now hold on. Helen's been with us 12 years. She knows every hymn in the book, shows up early, stays late. Which brings up another concern, Marcus interrupted smoothly. Reliability. I hate to bring this up, Helen, but you've missed 3 Sundays in the past 2 months. My daughter was in the hospital, I said quietly. She had pneumonia. Of course, and we all understand family comes first. But that's exactly my point. Can we depend on consistent coverage when personal obligations take precedence? The room fell silent. Tom Fletcher shifted uncomfortably. Even Mrs. Pemberton looked like she might object. What are you suggesting? Mr. Daniels asked. A more flexible arrangement. Reduced hours, reduced salary, but also reduced expectations. Helen could focus on what really matters, her family, while we bring in additional help for the more demanding aspects of the position. There it was. He wanted to hire someone else, probably another one of his friends, and keep me around as a part-time backup. All the responsibility when it suited him, none of the security. The revised salary would be $15,000 annually, Marcus continued. Still quite generous for part-time work. My phone buzzed. A text from David, * dinner Friday? There's something I want to discuss, *. Something he wanted to discuss. My stomach clenched. Was he going to ask about our future? About moving in together? About marriage? How could I explain that I was about to become even more financially desperate? Helen? Marcus's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. The board would like your response. 7 faces stared at me expectantly. Mrs. Pemberton looked smugly satisfied. Jake and his buddies seemed bored. Tom Fletcher and Mr. Daniels appeared uncomfortable but resigned. I need time to consider, I managed. Of course. Though I should mention, we've already reached out to some candidates, just to gauge interest. The music ministry is too important to leave unstaffed. The threat was crystal clear. Accept his terms, or be replaced entirely. As I drove home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. He'd backed me into an impossible corner, and he knew it. $15,000 a year wouldn't even cover Sarah's medical expenses, let alone everything else. But what choice did I have? The answer came Thursday morning in the form of an eviction notice. Not really, just a letter from our landlord about the annual rent increase. But when I saw the number, it might as well have been an eviction notice. $800 more per year, effective next month. Market adjustments, the letter explained cheerfully, as if poverty was just a minor inconvenience. I sat at my kitchen table, calculator in hand, running the numbers for the dozenth time. $15,000 from the church, minus taxes. Sarah's medical expenses. Rent, utilities, groceries, car payment, insurance. The math was brutal and unforgiving. We'd be short by at least $600 a month. Mom? Sarah appeared beside me, already dressed for her physical therapy appointment. She moved carefully, still favoring her left side, but her balance was improving. You look sad. I forced a smile and closed the calculator. Just thinking about boring grown-up stuff. Ready to go torture your muscles? She giggled, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her all week. Dr. Martinez says torture makes me stronger. If only it worked that way for everything. The therapy session was a small bright spot. Sarah managed 10 minutes on the balance beam without assistance, and her speech was getting clearer every day. Dr. Martinez pulled me aside afterward with encouraging updates about her progress, but I barely absorbed half of it. All I could think about was how we'd afford these sessions on Marcus's poverty wages. My phone rang as we were leaving the medical complex. David's name on the screen made my stomach flutter with a mixture of joy and dread. Hey, beautiful. Still on for dinner tomorrow? About that, I started, then caught myself. Sarah was right there, and she'd grown fond of David. How do you explain to a brain-injured 23-year-old that mommy might have to break up with the first good man in their lives because of church politics? Actually, could we do lunch instead? Sarah has a good day planned, and I hate to leave her alone in the evenings. It wasn't entirely a lie. Sarah did better with routine, and evening disruptions sometimes triggered anxiety. But really, I was stalling. Lunch felt less intimate, less likely to lead to conversations about our future that I couldn't handle right now. Of course. That little cafe you like? Noon? Perfect. After hanging up, I noticed Sarah studying me with that unsettling perceptiveness she'd developed since the accident. Brain injury hadn't dulled her emotional intelligence. If anything, she seemed to read people better now. David makes you happy, she said carefully, working through each word. Yes, he does. But something's wrong. I could lie. Should lie. But Sarah had been through enough deception during her marriage to that worthless ex-husband who'd abandoned her the moment her disability became inconvenient. Work is complicated right now, I said. The new pastor wants to change some things. Will we have to move? The question hit like a physical blow. Of course she'd worry about that. We'd moved twice since Robert died, each time to something smaller and cheaper. This apartment wasn't much, but it was stable. It was home. I won't let that happen, I promised, though I had no idea how I'd keep that promise. That evening, I found myself standing in my bedroom, staring at the framed photo on my dresser. Robert and me on our wedding day, 26 years ago. He'd been so sure of everything back then, our future, his faith, his place in the world. What would he think of the mess I'd made of things? More importantly, what would he want me to do now? The answer came with startling clarity. He'd want me to fight. Friday morning brought another blow. I was reviewing Sarah's insurance statements when the phone rang, Dr. Martinez's office, calling to inform me that Sarah's physical therapy benefits were being reduced. Effective immediately, she'd only be covered for 2 sessions per month instead of 4. I'm sorry, Mrs. Crawford, the receptionist said with genuine sympathy. Insurance companies are tightening restrictions on long-term rehabilitation. You can appeal, but that process takes months. After hanging up, I calculated the additional cost. $240 per session for the uncovered visits. Nearly $500 more per month we didn't have. I called David to cancel lunch, but he was having none of it. Helen, you sound terrible. Whatever's happening, we'll figure it out together. Please don't shut me out. Together. The word made my chest ache. There was no together if I couldn't even support myself and Sarah. The cafe was busy when I arrived, filled with the usual Friday lunch crowd. David was already waiting, looking handsome in his navy sweater, but his smile faded when he saw my face. What's wrong? I planned to ease into it, maybe over dessert. Instead, everything tumbled out, Marcus's ultimatum, the salary cut, the insurance reduction, the mounting bills. David listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. This Marcus character sounds like a real piece of work, he said finally. But Helen, I don't understand why you're considering staying. There are other churches, other positions. It's not that simple. Church organist jobs don't grow on trees, especially ones that pay enough to live on. Most congregations want young people now, fresh energy. I'm 45 with an associate degree from a community college. Who's going to hire me? Then maybe it's time to consider other options. I laughed bitterly. Like what? Retail? Food service? David, I've been playing church piano since I was 16. It's all I know. You could teach private lessons. Start a small music studio. With what startup money? And how long would it take to build a client base? Sarah needs her therapy now, not 6 months from now. David reached across the table and took my hand. Then let me help. The words I'd been dreading. David, no. Why not? We're talking about marriage anyway. This just accelerates the timeline. My heart stopped. We are? He smiled, pulling out a small velvet box. I was going to do this properly, but nothing about our relationship has been conventional. He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant solitaire. Helen Crawford, will you marry me? The diamond caught the afternoon light, throwing tiny rainbows across the table. It was beautiful. He was beautiful. This moment should have been beautiful. Instead, I felt like I was drowning. David, I can't. His face fell. Because of the church? Because I'm Methodist? Because you'd be rescuing me. Because I'd never know if you proposed out of love or pity. Because I refuse to be another burden in anyone's life. That's not. Isn't it? I pulled my hand away. You just heard my sob story and immediately offered to solve all my problems with a proposal. How is that not a rescue? David closed the box slowly. Because I bought this ring 3 weeks ago. Because I've been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. Because I've been in love with you since our second date, and everything else is just logistics. The sincerity in his voice made me want to cry. The timing is terrible, I know. But Helen, life is messy. Love doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. He leaned forward earnestly. Marry me because you love me. Let me help because that's what partners do. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk board meeting moved to Sunday after service. Final decision required. Asterisk. Marcus, cornering me again. Making sure I'd have no time to think, no opportunity to seek advice or alternatives. I stared at the message, then at David's hopeful face, then at the ring box sitting between us like a bridge I was too afraid to cross. I set my phone face down on the table, but not before David caught a glimpse of the screen. His jaw tightened. He's pressuring you. It's just business. The lie tasted bitter. Helen. David's voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. I forced myself to meet his eyes. This Marcus, he's not just cutting your salary, is he? There's something else. My silence was answer enough. David's expression darkened in a way I'd never seen before. What else has he done? It doesn't matter now. I reached for my purse, suddenly desperate to escape this conversation, this moment, the weight of that ring box sitting between us like an accusation. It matters to me. He caught my wrist gently. Helen, please. Talk to me. The concern in his voice cracked something inside me. He's been inappropriate. Comments about my appearance, standing too close, finding excuses to touch my hand or shoulder. Yesterday he cornered me in my office and basically told me I need to choose between keeping my job and keeping you. David went very still. He threatened you. Not exactly threatened. More like implied consequences. That's sexual harassment, Helen. And discrimination based on your relationship status. I pulled away from his grip. It's a church, David. They have different rules. Religious exemptions. And even if they didn't, do you think I have the money to fight a legal battle against an entire congregation? There are organizations that help with cases like this. Pro bono lawyers. And how long would that take? Months? Years? Sarah can't wait for me to win a lawsuit that might never pay out. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I have to go. Helen, wait. David stood too, his hand closing protectively over the ring box. Don't make any decisions while you're scared. I'm not scared. I'm realistic. But my voice shook, betraying me. Stay with me tonight. Both of you. Sarah likes me, and you need space to think clearly. The offer was tempting, dangerously so. And then what? Hide at your place while Marcus tells the whole congregation I'm living in sin? That'll really help my reputation. Since when do you care what those people think? Since they're the ones who'll either hire me or blacklist me from every church position in the state. I grabbed my purse, my movements sharp and jerky. You don't understand, David. You're a man with a stable job and a pension plan. You can afford principles. The hurt that flashed across his face made me immediately regret the words, but I couldn't take them back. Wouldn't take them back, because maybe if I pushed him away hard enough, this would hurt less. I'm also someone who loves you, he said quietly. Both of you. That almost broke me. Love isn't always enough. I walked toward the door, but David's voice stopped me at the threshold. Helen. The offer stands. The ring, the help, all of it. When you're ready to stop running. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. Because if I looked at his face right now, I'd cave. I'd say yes to the proposal and let him solve all my problems and hate myself for it later. Instead, I walked out into the cold afternoon air, leaving the best man I'd ever known sitting alone with a ring I desperately wanted but couldn't afford to accept. My phone buzzed again as I reached my car. Another text, this time from a number I recognized, Janet Morrison, the church treasurer. Asterisk, can we talk? Privately. There are things you should know about the budget. Janet asterisk. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Janet had been treasurer for 8 years. She'd know exactly where every dollar went. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as Marcus thought. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at Janet's message, my hands shaking too much to type a response. Janet Morrison was one of the few people at Grace Fellowship who'd always treated me with genuine respect, never condescending, never presuming to know what was best for me and Sarah. If she was reaching out about budget issues, it had to be significant. Asterisk, can you meet tonight? My house at 7, asterisk, I finally typed back. The response came immediately, asterisk, yes. And Helen, don't tell anyone we're meeting. Not yet, asterisk. The not yet sent a chill down my spine. What exactly had Janet discovered? I drove home on autopilot, my mind spinning between David's proposal and Janet's cryptic message. The ring box haunted my thoughts, simple, elegant, representing everything I wanted but couldn't let myself have. When I walked through the front door, Sarah was in her usual spot on the couch, but she looked up with unusual alertness. Mom? You look upset. I forced a smile, hanging up my coat. Just tired, honey. Work stuff. Is it about the new pastor? Because Mrs. Chen from next door came by earlier. She wanted to talk to you about something, but when I said you weren't home, she got this weird look on her face. My stomach dropped. Mrs. Chen had been a member of Grace Fellowship for 20 years before switching to the Methodist church downtown, David's church. What kind of weird look? Like she was worried about something. She said to tell you that people are talking and you should be careful. Sarah frowned. Mom, what's going on? And don't say nothing, because you've been acting strange all week. I sank into the armchair across from her, suddenly exhausted. Sarah was 23, not 13. She deserved some version of the truth. There have been some changes at the church. Budget cuts. My salary is being reduced. By how much? Half. Sarah's face went pale. Half? But Mom, we can barely make ends meet as it is. What about my therapy? The mortgage? I'm working on it. Are you going to quit? The question hung in the air between us. A month ago, the answer would have been an automatic no. Now? I don't know. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers fidgeting with a throw pillow in her lap. Would it help if I got a job? Honey, no. You need to focus on your health and your recovery. But I could do something part-time. Administrative work, maybe, or phone support. I've been thinking about it anyway. Dr. Martinez says having purpose outside of therapy might be good for me. The idea of Sarah working filled me with both pride and terror. Pride because she was strong enough to consider it, terror because it meant admitting I couldn't protect her anymore. Let's see what other options we have first, okay? At 7 sharp, I knocked on Janet Morrison's front door. She answered quickly, as if she'd been waiting by the window, and ushered me inside without the usual small talk. Her living room was immaculate as always, but Janet herself looked disheveled, her normally perfect silver hair slightly mussed, her blouse wrinkled. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing for me to sit on her floral sofa. Coffee? Please. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I heard the familiar sounds of preparation, the ritual giving us both time to gather courage for whatever conversation was coming. When she returned with 2 steaming mugs, her face was grim. Helen, I need to show you something, but first I need your word that you won't act rashly. That depends on what you're about to tell me. Janet set down her mug and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. Marcus lied to you about the budget constraints. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. What do you mean? Janet opened the folder and spread several financial documents across her coffee table. The church isn't in financial distress. In fact, our account balances are higher than they've been in 3 years, thanks to that large bequest from the Patterson estate last spring. I set down my mug with shaking hands and leaned forward to examine the papers. Even upside down, I could see the numbers, healthy balances in multiple accounts, far from the dire straits Marcus had described. But he showed me budget projections, I said weakly. Said we had to make cuts across the board. He showed you fabricated projections. Janet's voice was tight with anger. Helen, not only did he cut your salary without board approval, but he gave himself a raise. Doubled his father's salary, claiming it was market adjustment for his advanced theological education. The room started to spin slightly. Without board approval? The board doesn't even know about your pay cut. Marcus told us you'd agreed to a temporary reduction while the music program was restructured. Janet pulled out another document. He also created 3 new positions, all filled by friends of his from seminary. A youth outreach coordinator, a digital ministry specialist, and a congregational wellness advisor. Combined, their salaries equal more than what he cut from your pay. I stared at the numbers, my vision blurring with rage. So while I'm choosing between Sarah's physical therapy and our mortgage payment, he's padding his payroll with his buddies? It gets worse. Janet's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I think he's been skimming from the discretionary fund. Small amounts, but consistent. Money that's supposed to help families in crisis. The implications hit me like a physical blow. How many congregants had been told there was no assistance available while Marcus lined his pockets? Janet, why are you telling me this? You could lose your position if he finds out. She laughed bitterly. He's already planning to replace me. I overheard him on the phone yesterday, telling someone he needs a treasurer who's more aligned with his vision for modernizing church finances. Apparently, my inconvenient habit of actually tracking expenditures is problematic. My mind raced through the possibilities. What do we do? Report him to the denominational authority? That's one option. But Helen. Janet hesitated. There's something else. I heard Marcus talking to Brad Hutchins after service last Sunday. About you. Brad Hutchins was on the church board, a pompous man who'd always made me uncomfortable with his lingering stares and inappropriate comments about women in the congregation. What about me? Marcus was asking Brad about moral fitness clauses in employment contracts. Specifically, whether the church could terminate someone for conduct unbecoming a Christian woman. Janet's eyes were full of sympathy. Helen, I think he knows about David. Ice water seemed to flood my veins. How could he know? This is a small town. People talk. Mrs. Chen mentioned seeing you at the Methodist Church's potluck dinner last month. I closed my eyes, remembering that evening. David had convinced me to attend his church's social event, promising it would be low-key. I'd enjoyed myself for the first time in months, laughing with people who didn't judge every word I said or decision I made. So he cuts my pay to force me to quit, and if that doesn't work, he'll manufacture a morality scandal to fire me. That's what I'm afraid of. Janet started gathering the documents. But Helen, these financial irregularities, they're serious. If we can prove fraud, he'll destroy my reputation before we can prove anything. I stood up abruptly, pacing to her window. He'll paint me as a disgruntled employee making false accusations. Who do you think the congregation will believe, their pastor or the church organist who's been living in sin? Not if we're not the only ones coming forward. I turned back to face her. What do you mean? Janet's smile was grim. Marcus has made enemies, Helen. More than he realizes. Who else? I asked, sitting back down on the edge of Janet's sofa. Do you remember when Marcus restructured the Sunday school program last month? Janet pulled out another folder. He eliminated 4 volunteer teacher positions, claiming we needed fresh perspectives and contemporary teaching methods. All 4 teachers had been with the church for over 15 years. I nodded slowly. Linda Patterson, the Kowalski sisters, and Martha Fleming, my sister-in-law. Janet's jaw tightened. Martha didn't just lose her teaching position, Marcus publicly humiliated her during the education committee meeting. Called her methods outdated and potentially harmful to children's spiritual development because she used flannel board stories instead of digital presentations. The cruelty of it made my stomach turn. Martha Fleming had taught Sunday school since before Marcus was born, shaping 3 generations of Grace Fellowship children with patience and love. There's more, Janet continued. He's been pressuring Tom Rodriguez to retire from his custodial position. Keeps writing him up for minor infractions, a streak on a window, a chair slightly out of place. Tom's worked here 22 years, Helen. Never had a single complaint until Marcus arrived. Why would he want Tom gone? Because Tom's nephew is a licensed electrician who needs work, and Marcus wants to create a facilities management position. Full-time salary instead of Tom's part-time wages, supposedly to maintain our property more professionally. Janet's air quotes dripped with disgust. More nepotism disguised as improvement. I thought about Tom, quiet, hardworking, never missing a Sunday despite his arthritis. Does Tom know about the write-ups? He's terrified. His wife needs medication that costs $800 a month. He can't afford to lose this job, but he can't afford the stress either. I saw him in the parking lot last week, just sitting in his truck with his head in his hands. The scope of Marcus's manipulation was breathtaking. He wasn't just targeting me, he was systematically removing anyone who might challenge his authority or witness his financial schemes. What about the board members? Surely some of them see what's happening. Janet's expression darkened. The board is split. Brad Hutchins and 2 others are completely under Marcus's influence. They love his talk about modernizing and attracting younger families. The other 4 have concerns, but they're afraid to voice them directly. Afraid of what? Of being labeled as resistant to change, or worse, of having their own dirty laundry aired. Janet lowered her voice. Marcus has a talent for discovering people's secrets. Jerry Hoffman's gambling problem that his wife doesn't know about. Susan Chen's bankruptcy filing from 5 years ago. Small things, mostly, but embarrassing enough to keep people quiet. My blood ran cold. He's blackmailing board members? Not explicitly. But he has a way of mentioning these things casually in conversation, just enough to remind people he knows. Janet gathered the financial documents back into their folder. It's why I'm being so careful. If he suspects I'm collecting evidence. Janet, this is bigger than my salary cut. This is. I struggle to find the right words. This is corruption. Abuse of power. I know. But proving it won't be easy, and fighting it will be ugly. She looked at me directly. Are you prepared for that? Because once we start down this path, Marcus will come after both of us with everything he has. Your relationship with David will become public. Your personal life will be scrutinized. Sarah might be affected. I thought about my daughter, about Tom Rodriguez sitting alone in his truck, about Martha Fleming's humiliation, about congregants denied help while Marcus enriched himself. What's the alternative? Let him destroy everyone who gets in his way. Janet smiled for the first time that evening. I was hoping you'd say that. But we need more than financial records, I said, my mind already working through the challenges ahead. We need people willing to go on record. Janet nodded grimly. That's the problem. Everyone I've talked to is scared. Martha Fleming won't even discuss what happened in the education committee meeting. Says she doesn't want to cause trouble for the church. What about Tom? He's the most terrified of all. Marcus pulled him aside yesterday and mentioned how difficult it would be for someone Tom's age to find new employment if his performance issues continued. Janet's voice was bitter. Tom's 58, Helen. He knows Marcus is right. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the evening shadows lengthen across Janet's yard. So Marcus has successfully isolated everyone. We speak up alone, we're troublemakers. We stay quiet, he wins. There might be another way, Janet said carefully. But you're not going to like it. I turned back to face her. Tell me. Marcus's biggest weakness is his ego. He can't help bragging about his accomplishments, even the questionable ones. Janet pulled out her phone. What if we could get him to admit what he's doing? On record? You want to secretly record him? I want you to record him. He trusts you less than me, but he also underestimates you more. Thinks you're just a simple church organist who won't fight back. The idea made my stomach churn. Janet, if he found out. He won't, if we're careful. And Helen, it might be our only chance to protect everyone else he's targeting. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from David, haven't heard from you today. Everything okay? Sarah's therapy go well? The reminder of my real life, my relationship, my daughter, my future beyond this toxic situation, crystallized my resolve. What exactly are you suggesting? Janet leaned forward. Request a private meeting with Marcus. Tell him you want to discuss your salary situation professionally, that you're struggling financially but want to understand the church's position. Get him talking about his vision, his improvements, his authority. He'll be suspicious if I'm suddenly cooperative. Not if you approach it right. Tell him you've been reflecting on his leadership, that you realize you may have been resistant to change. Janet's expression was calculating. Appeal to his ego. Ask for his guidance on how you can better serve his ministry. The thought of groveling to Marcus made me physically ill, but I could see the strategic value. And hope he can't resist explaining how clever he's been? Exactly. Men like Marcus love having an audience for their superiority. Especially an audience they think they've defeated. My phone buzzed again. Another text from David, dinner tomorrow night? There's something I want to talk about. Something in his phrasing made my heart skip. Was he going to push for us to go public? Was he tired of hiding our relationship? The timing couldn't be worse, just when I was about to enter the most dangerous phase of my conflict with Marcus. There's another complication, I said, showing Janet the text. David's been patient about keeping our relationship quiet, but I don't think he'll wait much longer. And if we're about to start a war with Marcus? Janet's expression grew worried. If your relationship becomes public now, Marcus will use it to discredit everything we're trying to expose. He'll paint this whole thing as revenge from a disgruntled employee who got caught in inappropriate behavior. So I have to choose between protecting the investigation and protecting my relationship. Unless. Janet hesitated. What if David could help us? From the outside? What do you mean? Methodist churches have connections to legal aid services, advocacy groups. If we can document Marcus's abuse of power, David might know people who could help us take this to the denominational level properly. The possibility of bringing David into this felt both terrifying and relieving. But it would mean revealing everything, my financial situation, the humiliation I'd endured, the extent of Marcus's corruption. Think about it, Janet said softly. But whatever you decide, we need to move fast. I heard Marcus on the phone this morning, scheduling individual meetings with board members. I think he's consolidating his support before anyone can challenge him. I drove home from Janet's with my mind spinning, her words echoing in my head. We need to move fast. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like a physical force. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made up my mind about one thing: I couldn't keep David in the dark any longer. Sarah was already asleep when I got home, her bedroom door slightly ajar. I peeked in to see her curled up with her favorite stuffed elephant, looking peaceful for the first time in weeks. The sight strengthened my resolve. Whatever happened next, I was fighting for her future too. I texted David back, yes to dinner. We need to talk about everything. His response came immediately, everything sounds serious. My place at 7? Perfect. I barely slept that night, rehearsing conversations in my head. How do you explain to someone you love that you've been living a lie, not just about your relationship, but about the extent of your financial desperation, your willingness to endure humiliation for a paycheck, your cowardice in the face of injustice? The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. As I was helping Sarah with breakfast, my phone rang. Marcus's name on the caller ID made my stomach clench. Helen, good morning. His voice carried that particular tone of forced pleasantness that meant trouble. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, Marcus. What can I do for you? I've been reflecting on our previous conversation about your compensation, and I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Would you have time to meet with me this afternoon? Say, 4 o'clock in my office? Janet's words came flooding back, his weakness was his ego. Of course. I've been doing some reflecting myself, actually. Excellent. I'm glad you're open to discussion. See you at 4. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone. Either this was an incredible coincidence, or Marcus was more perceptive than I'd given him credit for. Had someone seen Janet and me together? Did he suspect something? Mom? Sarah's voice cut through my paranoia. You look worried. I forced a smile. Just church business, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. But as I drove Sarah to her therapy appointment, the timing felt ominous. Marcus calling the morning after Janet and I had made our plans seem too convenient. I found myself checking my rearview mirror more than usual, wondering if I was being watched. Dr. Peterson's waiting room was unusually crowded, and I recognized several faces from church. The Hendersons were there with their teenage son, and Beverly Walsh sat in the corner with her daughter. A cold realization hit me. If Marcus was systematically targeting people, he'd want to know about vulnerabilities like mental health treatment. Mrs. Morrison? A familiar voice made me turn. Tom Rodriguez stood near the reception desk, looking uncomfortable. I didn't expect to see you here. My heart sank. Tom's grandson had ADHD. I remembered the family asking for prayer requests. Hi, Tom. How are you doing? He glanced around nervously. Fine. Just, bringing my grandson for his appointment. He lowered his voice. Listen, I heard about your salary situation. I'm real sorry about that. Thank you, Tom. I heard you've been having some challenges too. His face went pale. Oh, that. Just some misunderstandings. Pastor Marcus is very thorough about maintaining standards. Can't fault a man for wanting excellence, right? The forced cheerfulness in his voice broke my heart. Tom, if you ever need to talk. No. Everything's fine. Better get going, don't want to be late getting back. He practically fled toward the elevator. I spent Sarah's entire session thinking about Tom's frightened face, about Marcus's convenient phone call, about the recording device Janet wanted me to use. By the time we left the building, I'd made another decision. I called Janet from the parking lot. He wants to meet at 4 today. That's fast. Are you ready? I will be. But Janet, if something goes wrong today, if he suspects anything, promise me you'll take what you have to the denominational office immediately. Helen, what aren't you telling me? I watched Tom Rodriguez's truck pull out of the parking garage, noting how he kept checking his mirrors. I think we're running out of time. At 3:30, I sat in my car outside the church, staring at the recording app Janet had helped me install on my phone. My hands were shaking as I tested it one more time, watching the sound waves spike and fall on the screen. The device felt like a loaded weapon in my purse. You can do this, I whispered to myself, but my voice cracked. Through the church windows, I could see Marcus moving around his office, gesturing animatedly as he talked on the phone. Even from this distance, his body language radiated arrogance. I'd spent the drive over rehearsing Janet's script, appeal to his ego. Ask for guidance. Get him talking about his vision. But now, faced with actually walking into that office and pretending to grovel, my resolve was crumbling. My phone buzzed with a text from David, looking forward to tonight. I have something important to ask you. The words sent my heart racing for entirely different reasons. Something important to ask. Was he going to propose? The timing was impossibly cruel. Just when everything in my life was exploding, David might be ready to offer me the future I'd been dreaming of. Another text, this one from Sarah's afternoon caregiver. Sarah's having a rough day. Keeps asking when you'll be home. Should I be worried? The reminder of my daughter's anxiety made my chest tight. She'd been picking up on my stress despite my efforts to hide it. How much longer could I protect her from the chaos I was about to unleash? At 3:58, I finally forced myself out of the car. The church felt different as I walked through the familiar halls, like a place I was seeing for the last time. The smell of old hymnals and furniture polish that had once comforted me now seemed cloying. Marcus's office door was open. He looked up as I approached, his smile sharp and calculated. Helen. Right on time. Please, come in, have a seat. I settled into the chair across from his desk, hyper-aware of my purse and the phone hidden inside. Thank you for making time to meet with me, Marcus. Of course. I've been thinking about our situation, and I realize I may have been abrupt in how I handled things. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Change is never easy, especially for those who've been here a long time. The condescension in his voice made my jaw clench, but I forced a grateful expression. I appreciate that. I've been reflecting too, and I think you're right. I may have been resistant to your leadership when I should have been more open to your vision. His eyes lit up with satisfaction. I'm glad you're seeing it that way. You know, Helen, this church has operated under the same tired paradigms for decades. My father, bless him, was too sentimental to make the hard decisions necessary for real growth. I nodded encouragingly, my hand moving casually to my purse to ensure the recording was still running. I'd love to hear more about your plans. How do you see the church evolving? Well, for starters, we need to optimize our resource allocation. Your music program, for instance, we were spending far too much on what essentially amounts to background accompaniment. He gestured dismissively. That money is much better invested in outreach programs that actually bring new members through the doors. That makes sense from a business perspective, I said, hating every word. I'm curious though, I heard Tom Rodriguez was also having some budget adjustments. Marcus's expression grew predatory. Tom's situation is more complex. He was, let's say, overly generous with his expense reports for the youth programs. I gave him a chance to correct the discrepancies quietly. My blood ran cold. Tom wasn't corrupt, he was one of the most honest men I knew. Marcus was manufacturing leverage. I see. And the other board members support these efficiency measures? The smart ones do. The others? He shrugged. Well, sometimes leadership means making unpopular decisions. The board serves at my discretion, after all. That wasn't remotely how church governance worked, but I kept my expression neutral. You've certainly thought this through comprehensively. I have to, Helen. This church will thrive under my leadership, but only if everyone understands their place in the new order. The threat was barely veiled now, and I realized with growing horror that Janet had been right about everything. Marcus wasn't just cutting budgets, he was systematically dismantling anyone who might challenge his authority. My phone buzzed with another text from David, but I didn't dare check it. Whatever he wanted to talk about tonight would have to wait. I was about to destroy everything. Marcus, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I need to ask you something directly. Are you saying that anyone who doesn't fall in line with your vision will face consequences? His smile widened, and I saw the predator beneath the pastoral facade. Helen, I think you're misunderstanding. I'm simply saying that those who embrace change will find themselves rewarded, while those who cling to the past. He spread his hands. Well, the church has limited resources for dead weight. Dead weight. I repeated the phrase, letting it hang in the air. Is that what you call a decade of faithful service? I call it what it is, outdated thinking that holds us back. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. Between you and me, Helen, there are others on my list. Beverly Walsh thinks her flower arrangements make her indispensable. The Peterson family with their constant prayer requests for their son's behavioral issues. Even some of the board members who can't see the bigger picture. My heart pounded as I realized he was confessing to a pattern of manipulation and control that went far beyond my situation. What kind of list, Marcus? People who need to be repositioned. Or removed entirely. His casual cruelty took my breath away. Take your situation, for example. Cut your salary, increase your stress, and eventually you'll either submit completely or leave on your own. Much cleaner than firing you outright. And if I don't leave? If I fight back? His laugh was cold. With what, Helen? Your stellar reputation? I wonder what people would think if they knew about your secret romantic entanglements. Yes, I know about your mysterious boyfriend. Small town, remember? Someone's always watching. The threat hit like a physical blow, but instead of fear, I felt a surge of liberating fury. You know what, Marcus? You're absolutely right. Someone is always watching. I pulled out my phone, the recording app still running, its timer showing 23 minutes of captured audio. And listening. His face went white. What did you? I recorded every word. Your admission that you're systematically targeting congregation members. Your threats. Your abuse of power. I stood, my legs surprisingly steady. And tomorrow morning, this recording goes to the denominational headquarters, along with a detailed report of your financial mismanagement. You can't do this. He lunged for my phone, but I was already backing toward the door. I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone about your little affair. Go ahead, I said, surprising myself with my calm. Tell them about David. Tell them I found someone who treats me with respect and kindness, things you clearly don't understand. Tell them I chose love over living in fear of a bully. I paused in the doorway. Oh, and Marcus? You might want to call your father. He'll probably want to hear this recording before the denominational board does. I walked out of that office with my head high, leaving behind a decade of my life but taking something far more valuable, my self-respect. David was waiting in the church parking lot, leaning against his truck with a worried expression. Janet called me. She said you might need. I kissed him before he could finish, right there in front of the church windows, not caring who saw. When we broke apart, he was smiling. I love you, I said. Whatever you wanted to ask me tonight, the answer is yes. He laughed, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Even before you hear the question? Especially then. As we drove away together, I saw Marcus watching from his office window, his empire already crumbling. For the first time in months, I felt free.